Welcome to Between Data and Risk podcast. Today we'll be talking about change management, or how to introduce changes into businesses effectively and with minimum disruption and make them stick. Our guest will be Steve Burrows, CBE, Chief Executive Officer of B2 Burrows. Stay tuned.
If you're a business owner or senior manager, you probably had more than enough about all the wonderful opportunities awaiting you in the era of digitalization.
Whether it is big data, cloud, data science, or whatever buzzword is currently trendy.
If you would like to hear someone dissecting these claims and showing you what it actually takes to improve business processes, you're in the right place.
This is Between Data and Risk, where we discuss real-life examples of what works and what doesn't in the world of business operations.
Hi, I'm Artur Cognition Shared Solutions Chief Risk and Strategy Officer, and with me is my co-host, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to this episode of Between Data and Risk. Today we'll be talking about navigating change in business, and we're excited to have with us our guest, Stephen Burrows, CBE, change management consultant, co-founder of stealth startup Innovation Advisor, who agreed to share some of his experiences with us. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, nice to be here.
So maybe let's kind of start with defining what we're talking about. Businesses often go through change. Well, change is the only constant, as they say, right? And executives they have to prepare the organization for the change. So how, in your opinion, how can you scope a change such that it's effective to be managed? It's not too small because it becomes trivial, and it's not too big. How do you actually scope a change such that it's viable?
Yeah, I think that saying that change is constant is absolutely true. And the reason that it's true is that every business generates revenue and quality of earnings based on its resilience. So what I mean by that is you can take a look at any business, whatever it does, and assess its resilience. And the simple way to do that is to ask yourself, what would it take to destroy this business? And it doesn't matter what you're doing. Let's say you're a professional services firm. It might be that if your 4 best people were hired away from you by someone else, your business would be in trouble. Or maybe you have a factory and if that one machine broke down or the power went out, it would seriously damage our business. And when you look at resilience, change is about improving the quality of your ability to fight the marketplace. So what is it that makes you special? And you have to move towards that thing. And it's called change management, but it's really about business resilience.
We love to hear it, because our motto as a company is resilience of operations worth having.
Yeah.
So we just couldn't agree more, I think.
I have to kind of say this is for me it's a quite a narrow but a specific definition of change, because you talk about the improvement in resilience, which is something that's very close to my heart as a risk manager. But I've seen change which is kind of necessitated by external factors, which doesn't necessarily improve resilience as such, but just kind of maintains status quo or kind of prevents worsening of resilience because of external pressures on the company. A lot of this recent in pretty much since 2008, change has been a constant in financial services where I come from, and it's been driven by regulatory changes, which very often has nothing to do with improving resilience of the firm as such. It may improve the resilience of financial markets in general through transparency, various client protection, but for the organization, it's purely an external stimulus to comply with regulatory pressures.
Yeah, and I'm talking about change that really requires it's a sort of you can change by dreaming of change, right? So I'm talking about change that actually takes root and it becomes actually part of your new routine. So, when you talk about regulatory changes, those are externally driven forces that you have to respond to because it's a minimum bar for entry into a marketplace. What I'm talking about is if you want to improve your business, just like improving yourself, I say changing a company is just like changing yourself. So if you want to do something, let's say lose weight and get fit, right? You decide that's a change that you want to make. You can dream about it. Nothing will ever happen. You can talk about it a lot. Nothing will ever happen. And in order to actually change, you have to have a reason for doing it. So there has to be a resilience, right? If I get fitter and healthier, then I can be, I can do more sport, or I can live a longer life or a better quality life. There's a goal, there's an objective to the change. And then you say the consequences of not doing this puts me in this place, and the consequences of actually doing this puts me in a different place. So first of all, I have to think about it. Change is premeditated. It doesn't happen by accident. And then I have to want to be determined to actually do those things, to actually make some physical changes. And then I have to believe that when I fail, which everybody does on all business change, there is a point of failure. There's a natural inclination to get too busy and go back to the way you did things before. You have to have the ability to rise again and put those failures behind you and embed something that becomes routine. And that's what I'm talking about in business resilience. It's, you have to look at, say, technology is disrupting the marketplace. And you can say, okay, I'll wait until such time as everybody else has adopted that technology, and then I will follow. And there are consequences to that. Blockbuster video is a good example of that. Or Kodak camera is a good example of that. But otherwise, you say, hey, I can see something is happening, and I'm going to get ahead of it, and I'm going to make my business a key leader in that new place. That requires change management, and that's what I do.
I would like to maybe use your metaphor and go back to Artur's question, because we all know it's better to be young, wealthy, and handsome, right?
Thank you.
But well, it's just a fact statement, not data guy. But as much as I would like to try, I don't know, playing in NBA probably won't be my any time in my future. So the question is how to distinguish between this dream, which can maybe destroy you when you because I like the saying that every corpse on Mount Everest was once a very driven individual. So how to distinguish between hopeless dream, which is endangering business, and this glimpse of hope, but you can really hold to and drive to. Do you have any advice on distinguishing?
Yeah, so I think we're talking a little bit about change management is driven by strategic planning. And the way I go about strategic planning is what I call scenario planning. So you have to, first of all, envisage a series of plausible futures. And so a plausible future is not just that I can see, let's pick something. I think that in the future there will be flying cars, right? I think that's probably likely to occur in the future. Now, the question is, do I want to be a manufacturer of flying cars? So the future is mostly unknown, but you can imagine a scenario in which if you were the manufacturer, the world's leading manufacturer of flying cars, you would become maybe not handsome and maybe not younger, but probably wealthy. And so the question is it plausible for me to become the world's leading manufacturer of flying cars? And that's a question that each business has to ask itself. If it's really not plausible, i.e., you don't really have a market position, you don't have rocket scientists as part of your team, you don't. There are barriers to entering that marketplace are too great. It is not a scenario that you should have in your strategic plan. And so the plausible futures measure is it realistically possible in a reasonable time frame for me to get to that position? And the hard thing is to say no, because we all tend to dream bigger than reality. And so part of it is you have to say, okay, if it's a plausible future, what are the steps, which I call now, new, and next? So what can I do now to move towards that plausible future? What new things would I have to do to create the potential that future could become real? And then what would be the next step for my business along that path? And quite often you can see the fatal flaws in people trying to achieve futures that are really not plausible for that company. I see that a lot. We love to dream, and people like to follow those dreams, and they like to believe that through osmosis or some sort of imaginary force, I will get from A to B. But we all know that any journey from here to there begins by knowing where there is and believing that I can take reasonable steps to move towards that position and in a reasonable time. When you put in Google Maps, you want to go from A to B, you know where B is, and you can say, if I want to be in New York in 5 hours, my plausible future is I need to get on an aeroplane. Right? If I think I'm going to drive there in 5 hours, I'm going to be seriously disappointed. I could waste a lot of time and energy and effort, but I will not be in New York in 5 hours' time. So realistic, plausible futures are really the goals to change management that actually sustains and creates new business position. This resilience is saying sometimes it's called IP or some secret sauce. Is like, what do I need to do to make the barrier to my competition so high that I can improve the quality of my earnings? And there are solutions to that for every business.
No, I think it's pretty reasonable. We had this exercise multiple times, especially when in the UK there was the new regulation imposed by FCA, which was requiring financial companies to think of plausible but severe scenarios and build their resilience based on that. I would like to make a step back, maybe. You spoke about dreamers. I'm really happy to hear that, because it means that cynical people like consultants are needed. But before we get there, Artur mentioned that executives need to prepare for a change, and I wanted to ask about your opinion, because there is a lot of I would say talk about democratization and how much in today's world the change is, I would say, executive driven. Can it be, I don't know, employee driven, bottom up? How from your perspective, how much these initiatives? I know that in the software development it's popular that there are guilds or some other communities which form and then aim to change something. So how this bottom up and top down approaches coexist in change management?
Yeah, I think all business is a team sport, and we all know. I think if you take an analogy of let's say a football team, for example, everybody has to buy into the philosophy of what you're trying to do in order to achieve something great. So in the early days when I was a young project manager, I remember my boss got me a coach to try and help me to change. And my coach said to me, there are two types of leaders. There's the general Custer and the general Patton type leaders. And the general Custer is the good-looking guy with the long blonde hair on the white horse that charges ahead and says, "Everybody follow me." And generally, it doesn't end well for those leaders because they're out in front, and the enemy is going to see them first, and therefore they're at pretty high risk of not lasting very long. And he said, and then there's the general Patton leader, which is really trying to look at the team that I have and say, what is the best role for everybody? What is the highest and best use of everybody that I have? And how can I make them work together in a way that's synergistic, that they add value to each other? And I think that's the way to make change. I tried to change from that general Custer type leader to the general Patton type leader by saying that I have to get people to first of all buy into this plausible future and want to get there, to have some motivation to get to that place. They see some benefit for themselves and some benefit for the company, and then to also have the skills to be able to do that. And I have to look at the team and say, where does it need strengthening? Where is it really weak? And maybe those people are not going to come on that journey with us. They don't want to. They're going to fight against it. I have to make changes to if you want to change the people, it's a necessary requirement. You have to get people that buy into what you're trying to do, and then to be able to deliver the best of themselves. So it's not a one person decides, everybody follows. It's a team sport, and you have to use your team it's not. I often say in a football team, if you simply changed a Super Bowl winning football team by swapping the wide receiver and the quarterback, the team would fail. And so everybody has to be in their right position, do what they do well, and then the team performs at its best.
And this is, I think, a great topic because it does kind of underline that change management is only partially about managing the moving parts in the change, and a big part of it is actually bringing the people along. But in our practice, we've gone through various companies and various changes with various clients, and sometimes you get a team which is responsive to the change. There's always a bit resistance because people like there's inertia. It's almost the same as the physical force, but sometimes people kind of go along and they're responsive. Sometimes they're just you can't move them with a big crowbar.
Yeah.
So in your experience, is it the leaders' responsibility to bring the people along? Is this something that depends on the change kind of and has to come from aligning the change? Or what conditions are sufficient and necessary for people to actually be on board?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of standing joke that if you get a group of people in a room and you say, who wants change? Everybody put your hand up. If you want change, everybody will put their hand up. And if you ask the same group of people who wants to change, nobody will put their hand up. And that is, it's not exactly true, but it's broadly true. So people have to believe in it. People are generally a little selfish. They're a little egocentric, and so they have to see something for themselves in the change. So when I run change management workshops, I do this fist or five voting system. I don't know if you've ever used it, but it's a sort of a quality system. So I would say we want to go from A to B, and I'll define where B is. This is a scenario, and I say who in the room would be happy if we got to point B. And the way I want you to score happiness is, if you would think that would be the best thing we could possibly do, you give it 5. If you think it would be a reasonable place to get to, I would give it maybe 3. If I'm completely against this, I give it 0 fist. I'm completely against it. And I try to get everybody to assess their feelings in just with their hand to give some sort of quality to the system. And then anybody who's a 5 and a fist, I ask them to leave the room and talk to each other. Like explain why they're completely for it or they're completely against it. And the goal of that is to try and understand the perspective, not just to get people to agree that it should happen, but to really try and understand. Then we'll come back and we'll try again. And we're trying to try to assess whether, the majority of people are really for it. There's really not that strength of feeling that exists in the room. Maybe there are some considerations, some fists that should be listened to more, because in these rooms, there's often a loud voice that dominates the room, and people can't express their feelings. And so I'm trying to give it some sort of data-driven vibe of feeling that allows us to move the team along, right? Not trying to get everybody to be 100% happy or 100% sad. We're really trying to sort of move the needle towards, is this a direction of travel that we broadly believe is the right thing to do? And what you find is some of those people who put up their fists, it's not because of a business reason, it's because of how they see it might impact them. And so they want to understand it through their own eyes. The ownership of the company, which could be, a family-held business or a public company, whatever it might be, those stockholders have a particular motivation, but the people who are making the change happen have a different motivation. And you have to get everybody to be broadly aligned. I mean, there will always be people, if you're rowing a boat in a race and somebody's drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat, they're probably best not being in your boat. And they're not going to travel from A to B in this change management process. The sooner they leave, the better. But everybody who does agree to row the boat should understand why they're doing it and want to do it. Otherwise, it won't go so fast.
In our experience, we noticed that when we work with the crews, of these boats, there are 3 factors that we need to ensure that we communicate if we want the change to happen. One is benefits, and this is critical. But also, we notice that it's often not sufficient. We focus on explaining them how the environment will look like after. And we try to explain to them that they will be secure. We try to ensure that they feel secure with the change. So it's not only about the benefits. I remember once a very important director of very, 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 very big corporation coming and saying people who he laid off a couple hundred people, saying you should be grateful because thanks to your sacrifice, the company will survive. I think I spoke about it in one of the episodes. But yeah, I think it's pretty important that you explain and give this clarity. In our work also, we focus very much on explaining explicitly how the new processes will look like. This is what we do. We deal with processes. So that's our take. This security and
psychological safety. Yeah?
Psychological safety, yes. But okay, I digress. I had a question, and I was speaking for so long that I forgot about. Oh yeah, do you have like, I don't know, good tools for communication? Because I guess you also led the changes of, I don't know, big companies with thousands of people involved. I guess going and talking to each other is maybe not possible to just convince everyone.
Yeah.
How would you propose, or what do you do to lead a change in a really big firm, in a big company where there is more people than there is? You have ability to influence, face to face directly.
Yeah, I think one of the. Let me talk a little bit about the barriers to this. Is that companies have a hierarchy, right? So they're like the military. If you draw a company organizational chart, it looks like some sort of pyramid. Somebody's at the top and somebody's at the bottom. But companies don't function like that. Companies have what I call VIVs. So a VIV is a very important voice. And those are people that people listen to. So generally, people get their clues as to whether the strategic plan is good or bad from the people that they trust. And organizational hierarchy is not a measure of the score of the depth of trust. And so what I always begin by trying to identify in the company who are the very important voices, who are the people that people look to and trust. And I will get those people involved in the strategic plan. And it's not just a hierarchy. Many firms will say they've burned through 5 CEOs. The board has changed multiple times. All of the staff don't necessarily trust the board. They think that they're doing it purely for the reasons that motivate them, which may be financial. And that is not, they're not the reasons that motivate the people to actually want to do this change process. So I get the very important voices together. And I actually always begin by spending 1 hour on a telephone call or in person with every single one of those very important voices. And I ask them, what's wrong with the company? In your opinion.
How do you identify these
and
VIVs?
I'm guessing those very important voices are also not the loudest voices, right?
Not at all. They're the people that when the strategic plan is announced, somebody says, what do you think? And they tell them in the break room or somewhere, I think this is just motivated by profit, or it's just motivated, but they want to close us down. The people who say that will become, bad news travels about 20 times faster than good news.
Light.
So they'll look for something that's wrong, and then they'll believe that, this fake news mantra, has some roots in reality. People that will become the new law and of the subculture that goes alongside the strategic plan. So it's really important to address that head on at the beginning and to get those very important voices to be heard, because they're trusted for a reason, and then to listen to them, to get them to see something of them that they created in the strategic plan. And then you will get much more trust in delivering whatever change you're trying to deliver through the organization, because they'll say, yes, I was there, I understand why we're doing this, and I believe in it, and it's got much more chance. There's no guarantees, right? And not every leader knows who are the very important voices in the firm. But if you ask around a little, it soon becomes obvious who are the people that people look to say, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And so they've got to be involved.
So you got to get your ear to the ground, so to speak, and don't do it from the ivory tower.
That trust is not something it's earned, and people value trust very, very highly. Everybody who is trusted understands that it's very easy to lose that trust, and so they care for it and they nurture it. So it exists. You've just got to find it, and when you do and you involve those people, it's a much better process than if you try and send something down from the ivory tower and expect everybody's going to just applaud it as a piece of genius thinking, because they won't.
So speaking of ivory towers, I think this brings us very nicely to the topic of consultants who swoop in from outside and bring in these nuggets of wisdom and experience. And I expect everyone to listen. And we've been in this situation. We got the stink eye from various people saying, who are you? You don't know anything about our company, and you've come here to kind of tell us how to manage change. So firstly, let's ask, why do executives bring in consultants, and do they need consultants to manage change? We often, I have to admit, as a company, we've gone through a bit of flux. We kind of first believe that we can only support change because change needs to be managed internally within a firm. We can support it, but we can never manage it. Then we kind of changed our view a bit and said, you know what, we actually can manage change if requested, because we just need support from the executive. So kind of the tables have turned a bit. What's your opinion on this kind of who needs to drive it, who needs to pull it?
Yeah, and well, first of all, you have to, I said that everybody has to do this for a reason. So, my reason is I enjoy creating change, positive change inside organizations. I decided that when I became a consultant, I knew the old adage that, a consultant takes your watch from you and tells you what time it is. And I didn't want to be that person. I actually wanted to be an agent of change. So I worked with a consulting firm where many of the consultants had 20 or 30 clients, and they could only do 1 hour a week with each of those clients. And I did not want to be that person, because I felt that was you could touch a lot of different people, but it was very shallow. I wanted to develop a deep relationship with my clients. So I decided that I could only work with 4 or maybe 5 people at a time, which meant about a day a week. And that's worked well for me. So I basically embed myself in the organization as part of the team. And I like to stay through the entire process of change. And that means, as the agent of change, my job is to make sure that it happens. And the reason I think that's important is I always ask people, I meet a lot of people, I talk to a lot of friends. I've got 25,000 people or something that follow me on LinkedIn. So I talk to people a lot. I always ask them, how's it going? And the answer I get 99% of the time is, I'm really busy, or we're really busy. And I find myself going, why do people do that? They value their quality of what they do by how little available time they have. And so asking somebody who's really busy to then create a change management process is just a recipe for failure. So I take the view that everybody's really busy. I should help them to look at what is the highest and best use of their time, and to create some space in their working life to focus on change. But that's going to take a little time. And I've got to be embedded in the organization to actually show that I'm going to commit my time to making that change actually happen. And so keeping that change management process alive, keep the strategic plan alive. That's where change really happens. I think being a consultant that says, I know what you should do, I'm going to tell you what to do and leave you to it, look back in a year and hope that you followed my advice, that's just not going to produce anything tangible, I believe. And so, there's consultants and consultants, and I'm a consultant who embeds myself in an organization. So I've taken on fractional roles, fractional leadership roles. But I have a company email account. I'm involved in the company meetings. I talk to the staff. I go around the offices. I act like an employee through the change management process.
I must say that it reminds me of our, let's say, beginnings as a company, because we started as a data science company, sort of consultants, and we started with creating models, some data solutions, and giving them to the client, and we realized that they just collect the dust on some shelf somewhere in the back. So we came into this change management out of the necessity and understanding that you cannot just give. It's also not true that if you give somebody the fishing pole, he'll be fed for the rest of his life. you need to spend some time teaching him how to, cook the worm or whatever it is that you do when fishing. But yeah, I just can agree.
Yeah.
But how do you measure change? You are there and you see you're with them for the time when they are changing. When is the time you say, okay, that's good, thank you, we made it?
Yeah, so key performance indicators are pretty key, because just like anything, this journey from here to there is along the way there are things that you have to do. So the analogy is always change management is going on a journey. So when you go on a journey, if you're going to go in an electric vehicle, you're going to have to figure out where the charging stations are, and you've got to figure out how much power have I got to get from here to there. So those KPIs are really important. So I start with the goal. What are the metrics that we're going to have when we reach the destination, and what are the indicators along the way that show us that we're moving towards those metrics? And I do subscribe to the notion that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And people quite often want to use very qualitative measures to see if you're moving in a certain direction, and I think they're fine, but there has to be quantitative data that supports it, because otherwise you are, a dream is very sort of qualitative, right? You can have these wonderful dreams, they don't actually achieve anything unless you measure an outcome as a consequence of that. So whether those are financial or headcount or geographic reach or services, or there's a bunch of KPIs. They're not just about money, but there have to be some metrics that you're constantly checking in on to see if you're going in the right direction. So one in recent years, one of those metrics has been tenure of staff. Like, are people, staff turnover rates have been very high in companies, and it's been one of the most expensive processes to manage inside a company. So how do we increase tenure? How do we get people to stay here longer, to not, to increase the amount of time that they spend with us? And so it's not just a financial metric. Yes, there are consequences of people leaving, but let's try and, do what we say. Let's make this a place that people want to work at. Best in class workplace. And so you're measuring the amount of time that on average that people are employed by you. That might be a metric which is completely different to, profitability or revenue or other just money type metrics. They're based around people.
We have metrics for almost all the processes that we employ. We rely very much on APQC process framework, and they provide a lot of metrics. We have some of ours. I'm a data guy. I need to believe in data.
but
the sometimes too much.
The metrics. The metrics have to be meaningful. So, I give you an example. Professional services firms, every professional services firm measures utilization, which is what percentage of the available hours is spent billed to customers. And I argue that's not a very good usable metric, because it relies upon people at the end of the week, what they put on their timesheets. It doesn't mean you're making a profit. It doesn't mean you're doing good work. If you measure net labor multiplier, which is of that billable time, how much revenue is generated or how much cash is received, it's a much better metric, because the customer will only pay you if they think the time was useful. And the more revenue you generate for less hours shows how efficient you are. So there's a quality to measuring net labor multiplier. There is no quality to measuring utilization, but every professional services firm measures utilization. I think it's a useless metric.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the kind of the all that you get what you measure, right? If you measure utilization, you will get very busy people doing shoddy work. If you measure the quality, then you will get. But I wanted to kind of ask you about the other facet, because we've talked about metrics and data, and I'm the risk side of the equation, and with any change comes risk, and I see that it comes into different flavors, so to speak. One is the change that comes to the risk that comes to the company from actually having a change, and one is the change in the risk inherent in the change process itself, the fact that it may go off track, fail completely. So do you see risk management in change management as something that requires specific handling and requires kind of because I've seen people who do it very explicitly, and I personally like to do it very explicitly. Some people think it's part of change management per se. It's just another facet of doing change management. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, in my view, it's absolutely vital. So it's a bit like anything else. You're going to make an investment in yourself. The change management process is investing in your own business. And we all know with our own investments, we only invest what we can afford to lose. So first of all, you have to understand, what are you prepared to commit to this? And you're going to measure the KPIs along the way. And this mantra of, if you're going to fail fast, is the way in which you reduce the impact of change, cost of change that is not producing a useful outcome. So you've got this constant sort of anchor that is saying, I've got to make sure that this change is having a positive outcome on the company. Now, it's not a straight line. So there are going to be moments, just like the weight loss program or the getting fit program, there are going to be moments where there's a relapse, something goes wrong, and you can't say that every point of failure is the end. You have to see it for what it is. But this managing risk is super important because business is a dynamic environment. So when you do strategic planning, that's a very static thing. It was true at the moment you did it, based on the data you had. It's not true the next day. And so you've constantly got to reassess, are the core assumptions that went into this change management program still valid? And those things can change, right? We're in a period of innovation where, take the Blockbuster Video example. There was a point at which they had to say to themselves, if we continue like this, we will go out of business, right? And they chose not to take the correct path. And you've constantly got to look at what you're doing against the ever-changing business environment, this dynamic business environment, and ensure that you revalidate the assumptions. And so the way I do that, I tend to think that most strategic plans are 3 or 5 years long, and you need an annual review of the core assumptions of the plan to make sure that those things are still valid. And if they're not, be prepared to change direction. So the ways to get from A to B are multiple. And if you're on the wrong path and you realize that this is really just going to lead you into a dark forest and perhaps is not what you thought was the right thing to do, change direction. And so you've got to be nimble. You've got to be aware. You've got to revalidate your assumptions along the way. But provided you made good scenario plans at the beginning, I have not yet come across a strategic plan that I've helped create that hasn't remained valid over its 5-year period. And so, but you've got to keep checking on it. I'm sure one will happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
So yeah, I think this is we've touched on the importance of the leader. We've touched on the importance of the team and bringing people along.
Yeah.
And we've touched on the importance of managing the change itself and the risk management, the data, the metrics. I think this gives us all the important pieces. Do you think there's, apart from these facets of change management that we've mentioned, there's anything else that needs to be highlighted to complete the picture?
Yeah, I do think that if you look at, we talked a little bit about the importance of the leader, but one of the things we didn't talk about was what is the leader's role in change management? Because I said, the leader doesn't decide and everybody follows, but the leader is absolutely key. Most business leaders are really focused on delivering quarterly results. They have a very maybe even their own bonus structures, their own personal KPIs are very short-term driven. It's often a criticism of public companies that they only deliver quarterly results. And somebody once said to me, if a public company cured cancer, the following year the stockholders would say, well, what disease have you cured this year? It would never be enough. There's always got to be a sort of a cure for cancer every single year once you've done it once. And so leaders tend to become inwardly focused. They're focused on maintaining the status quo and delivering results on a short-term basis. So it really takes a very bold leader to say, I am going to create a strategic plan to put this business into the place that it really needs to be 3 or 5 years from now. It really takes an enlightened person, and they don't, they're not common. The most leaders who get to CEO positions have got there by being good managers. They've been, very operationally strong. They're very good at delivering results. They run a tight ship. They're not chosen because they're futurists. They're looking at what's coming next. And this sort of balance between the entrepreneurial CEO and the operational CEO is a sort of personal tug of war. So it really does take somebody to say, I'm going to look past the quarterly results and say, this is working great right now, but will it hold true in a few years' time? I'm going to take a look at that. And that's where it begins. And those people, those are my clients, right? The people who do that, that's when the phone rings.
Both of them.
Yeah. You've got to have that sort of, but you've got to have both of you've got to have the sort of motivation to want to make things better than they are today and believe that could be different than it is today. And it's a tough thing to do.
Almost sounds like a good recipe for this would be to have a futuristic dreamer, forward-looking CEO and a really down-to-earth operational COO who will make things happen for the CEO.
But that's right? There was already here the comparison to the army. Like when you have a ship, you have a captain who says what needs to happen, and then you have XO, first officer, who makes sure that things are happening. The captain does not deal with everyday problems. He just needs to know where the ship needs to be and what it does need to do.
And
so I think
it needs good advice. I would say that most companies, don't invest enough money in research and development. Most companies don't invest enough money in innovation, and so you can create quite economically an innovation team within your company whose job it is to give you advice about what might the future look like, what might be the opportunities that face us that we'll be facing in 5 years' time. And you'll have people inside the organization who would be delighted to be part of something like that. Invest in those things, get good advice. Not everything comes from, what you read on the internet. It comes from people who know the business, know the competition. They've left and they've joined somebody else and they've come back to you and you need to take the time to say, what should we be watching out for? What might the future look like? There's plenty of good advice out there if you're just open to listening to it.
We had an episode.
Yeah, exactly.
About Innovation Labs.
With Richard Turin. So Innovation Labs is exactly, we're very fond of Innovation Labs and the whole concept. I think that kind of brings us to a nice conclusion, because I think we've given our listeners quite a lot of pointers of what change management is built of and how it needs to be directed. If people wanted to learn more about your ideas and contact you, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find. So LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me. Steve Burrows, CBE. I'm a commander of the British Empire. I'm very proud of it. So you can easily find me on LinkedIn. I publish posts on a regular basis. I'm perfectly happy for you to also publish my email address and cell phone number on the website so that people can find me.
I don't think we'll go that far, but yes, we will provide links to your LinkedIn profile and to your companies on the description to the episode. Marian, you look like you're eager to add something.
No, I'm not. I'm just impressed. It's just my impressed face. You can rarely see it. So remember, take a screenshot.
Yes, I don't know. Steve, thank you very much for sharing your experience. It was a very exciting episode, very good one. I think there are lots of great pointers, and as usual, let's hope it was of use to someone. Thank you for listening.
You can find more about Steve's company, B2 Burrows, at stephenburrowscbe.wixsite.com/B2Burrows. As usual, all links to the references will be available in the notes to this episode.
Also, don't miss the next one, where we'll be talking about private equity investments in the lower middle and middle market businesses. Our guest will be Joe McIsaac, operating partner at Woodlake Group, a private investment firm with a focus on this specific sector.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or visit pda.show to find out more about future episodes and guests. You can also check out Cognition.llc for more information on Cognition Shared Solutions, our services, and other events hosted by us.
For now, it's thank you from myself, Artur, and my co-host, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian Siwiak.
Thank you, and goodbye.